San Francisco.
All right, you guys, it's episode 41 of Inner Demons, and you already know what it is. I'm going to get straight to it. So check it out, you guys. I had anticipated dropping a video for you guys tonight. However, our good friends at YouTube decided to flag the video. So due to the fact that they now have to do a manual review in order to clear the video, we're just going to drop it whenever it clears. I was trying to premiere it, but it's going to end up getting too late. In the meantime, in between time, I figured, you know what? Let me go ahead and knock out an Inner Demons. It's been a while since I dropped an Inner Demons, so I'm going to show some love right now. Anyways, the video we're dropping tonight is about the Andre Reyes story. The individual that, it's called Norteño to Marine. It's the individual that tripped out over there in Modesto, killed a cop, and you guys know the story. It's an older story, but it's still a good story. Anyway, so episode 40 of Inner Demons. Told you guys, caught a violation, how I caught that violation, went up to the bay, and I was up there with both of the Roach brothers, Big Roach and Little Roach. Now, like I said, during the entire time I was up there in the bay on this violation, Eddie Roach and his brother, they would come out on the tier and, you know, we'd have a chance to chop it up. This is probably one of the first times that I really got educated as far as the street activities. This is when I really started to get indoctrinated on how to run a regiment, how to manage the money, how to devise different methods of communication. I mean, they gave me, both of these guys had extensive training and extensive experience as far as working on the streets. So both of them basically were giving me that schooling, and I was absorbing it. Everything that I could get, I was getting it from these guys. Now, at one point, and I told you guys, Eddie was stressed out about a case. He kept talking about, fuck, bro, you know, I don't think I'm going to make it home. I think Santa Clara County is going to come pick me up. But, you know, he fell short of mentioning what it was, which it wasn't none of my business. However, I had pretty much figured that, you know, by the way he kept talking about it, that it was something serious. And it was. I think I mentioned it already to you guys in episode 40. See, that's what happens when too much time goes by between episodes. I forget shit, and then it ends up being repetitive, and then you guys want to beat me up in the comments. But anyway, so I would end up finding out that, you know, he did get pulled back to Santa Clara County. When it came time for him to parole that same day, they actually pulled both of them out the morning that Eddie paroled because they both look like each other. They're not twins, but they fucking resemble each other. You can tell they're brothers as soon as you look at them. So, you know, because of the seriousness of the case, it ended up being a double homicide and, you know, some attempted homicides with a bunch of gang shit attached to it and a whole bunch of other conspiracies and participating in the criminal street gang and all kind of shit. They hit him with some good stuff. So because that case was hanging over his head, they brought them both out, wanting to make sure that they got the right one. One of them, which I believe was Eddie, had a bullet in his hand that he wasn't never able to get taken out. Guess it was in a spot where really didn't need surgery on it to leave it there, but he just never got around to it. And they knew that somehow, and I think it was related to the case. So they took him down to medical, and they actually x-rayed him to make sure that it was him and that he had the bullet in his hand, which made no sense. They got fingerprints and pictures and all this other shit, but that's how serious the case was. That's how serious they were taking it. So Eddie would end up getting transferred back to Santa Clara County. Now, this was back in 1994. This was in 1994, 93, 94, right around there. So he'd end up getting shipped over there, and, you know, everybody that was fighting those indictments at that time would end up being over there with him. I believe they pulled Pinky back on that one. and his brother Louis Roach would end up getting pulled into that one as well later on. Gusano, some females, a bunch of other cats. So when he left, I ended up moving in with Louis Roach. And that's when I got more, education as far as not only just the street activities, but being in the cell with somebody, you're able to sit there and really just dig into it, the nuts and bolts of it. And that's what we did. We dedicate an hour or two to just chopping it up, but in the sense of Glesha, gaming me up. And that's what he would do. So every day we did that for about I think we were celled up for about a good 4 months before I would end up paroling. Now, I would end up getting out in 94. My directives at that time were to establish the city, San Francisco, and to basically get everybody, up and on track out there. A lot of the homies out there, and let me just make it clear, there was only a few. It was probably around 6. That's how big the regiment was in San Francisco. I know it don't make no sense. You got a big city like Frisco, but there was only like 6 individuals that were willing to function out there because the homies just ain't on the homie type of shit out there. They're not into the politics, the prison politics, all the political stuff. They're not with it. They're on some, what I'm saying? They're doing that motherfucking ghost. You guys know what it is, man. That old crazy ass shit. Most of my homies are like that. They all got gold teeth. I know some of you motherfuckers gonna say something about what I just did right now. That's never been me. I never picked that up from the city. That style, I got homeboys from the fucking city called motherfucking Butter, Milk Scotch, and motherfucking Pimpy, the Shorty, the Pimpy. You know what I'm saying? Straight. And everybody out there's got long hair, gold teeth, and they all players, and they all fucking ghost riding the whip and motherfucking, they on that thug dizzle shit out there for real, man. That Thiz Latin movement. So anyway, those were my directives, were basically just to go out there and, being that this was really like one of the first times that I would actually go out there with directives to break ground, to start from scratch. I was advised, just go slow, take your time and build. There's no reason to go out there and start rushing. That's when you make mistakes. That's how you get caught up. So, Big Roach would end up being my channel. Rab at that time, Conejo, yes, the Conejo in the state from Operation Quiet Storm. He was my channel for about 4 or 5 years. I'm going to be talking extensively about him later on in Inner Demons. But at that time, Conejo was in good standings. He had basically from Santa Rosa, I want to say he even had Alameda County at that time, San Francisco, and maybe even Sacramento. That whole region right there was Conejo's. So Roach was my channel, but Conejo was my padrino. So I would report everything to Roach, and I would do that religiously for the next few years. And, Conejo basically would be the one that would be pumping out the directives. Now, when I got out, well, that's going to come later. I'm putting the cart before the horse. So anyway, I would end up paroling. I got out there, I did everything that he told me to do as far as, taking it slow. But, I did hit the streets running. I wanted to go out there. I wanted to build. I was anxious. I wanted to show the homies what I was capable of doing. I wanted to show them that I could go out there and build a regiment, get the homies on track, and convince a lot of the homies to start working with us again, to have that type of influence on them. I took it as a personal challenge. I wasn't sloppy, but I did go out there and again, I did all the grunt work. I went out there, knocked on, all the doors myself, sat down with a lot of different homies, went out, took them out to lunch, chopped it up with them, let them know this is what it would entail right here. To make a commitment, this is what it would consist of. And I was a different type of C. I was always a leader. And well, at that time, I wasn't a C yet. At that time, I was just barely, I was getting ready to make that step, but it didn't happen at that point. Not at that point. This was the end of 93, the beginning of 94. So it was coming within the next year, but I was still a leader. Even though I was still an NR member, I still had that leadership quality about myself. And I'm not sitting here, you know, there's no kind of, ego about it. There is none. But I've always been a leader. That's just always been me. I've always carried myself like a leader. I've always, presented myself like a leader. I've never been a follower. However, I can follow directives. If, I got to get in line under somebody else, I have no problem with that. I'm not the type of big head motherfucker that don't know how to get in his place either. There's a lot of C's like that. Once they get a taste of a little bit of, authority, then they don't know how to act. They think that, they're always supposed to be fucking the one in charge. Like Big Smiley. We'll call it the Big Smiley syndrome. So anyway, so 94, I get out there, my mom, she's still living in the city. She's out, she's doing her thing. She helps me a little bit, get set back up. I didn't have nothing. I didn't have nothing set up at that time. I wasn't balling. I didn't have no connections out there in the city, that I could really rely on to help build me up, or anybody to help, to front me anything. There was nobody out there like that I was in touch with at that time. So everything that I had was personal resources. So anyway, I started to build, and I kept roach up on everything that I did. And, I would only stay out for a brief minute. It's not even worth talking about the shit that I did out there, during that violation. I got out, I hooked up with Vince Eakin, one of the homies out of the city, a homeboy named Spike, another homie, I'm not going to mention him probably because he don't want to be mentioned. So there was like 6 of us. Loquito from Frisco was out at that time, YA baby, that would end up becoming a C. Nicoya was out there, Chewy was out there. So there was a small crew. I got them working, we were slinging, but again, it wasn't the type of regiment that I would build later, where there were, squad leaders, and there were clear policies that were being implemented, and we were getting together, having group meetings, and it wasn't like that. It was kind of a loose-knit type of, agreement that we had to work together out there to generate money. But as far as anything beyond that, that was it, which wasn't really the way that you're supposed to, operate a regiment. So I would learn that later. It comes with time. It comes with experience, hands-on experience. So anyway, I would end up catching a parole violation. I don't even remember what time. I'm telling you guys, I stayed in San Quentin. I'm going to call San Quentin my first home, because I stayed in Quentin more in the 90s than I did on the streets. Quentin was always like, that was the spot that I stopped off at before I either hit the Bay or Corcoran. So I stayed there in Quentin, sometimes 2, 3, 4 months waiting before they shipped me out, put me on a bus. So, and it was good, because being in San Quentin, you have a lot of transit, a lot of homeboys coming and going. You see everybody passing through, and it's the reception center / you got death row over there, and then you got the mainline GP. There's a lot of shit going on. There's a lot of stuff going on, and I'm going to get into all that later when, I get into how it is to run Quentin, because I really want you guys to understand the dynamics of it. San Quentin is a different kind of animal as far as, running a prison. I've ran other prisons, Susanville. I've ran, Susanville. That's the only other prison that I ran. But I can tell you guys, just knowing how other prisons operate, if you have other prisons that are probably similar to San Quentin, but they had to be like a reception center. Chino would probably be the equivalent of San Quentin. But when you're dealing with all these different types of inmates, death row, mainline, reception center, the oil. There's always a lot of activity. It's nonstop fucking paperwork, answering thousands of kites all day, man. I'm telling you, I used to sit there writing up kites, doing reports, investigations, answering shit, answering a bunch of different, questions that homies would ask for direction on, and, other investigations that were going on. I had to make decisions about people's status. So there was a lot of stuff going on every time I went through Quentin. And mostly every time that I went through there, I ended up getting the keys. And that's just the way that it ended up working out. Usually I get there and it'd be another C, but because I had the experience, and just because I guess the way that, I ran a good program. I made sure that the homies were taken care of. I ran a tight ship. Motherfuckers liked the way that I ran it. And, I led by example. A lot of C's that I met going through Quentin: Bubba from Salinas, Wino from Salinas, Smokey from Salinas, Boxer from Salinas, Armando Heredia, Suave from Salinas. You had Lefty from Excelsior from San Francisco. You had, again, Loquito was an NF member, Chewy. I mean, I go on and on and on, but I met a lot of C's, or I did a lot of time with C's and functioned there in Quentin with a lot of different faces. So let me say this. Around this time in 1996 or 1994, keep wanting to jump ahead, but we don't want to do that because you guys want me to get into as much, elaborate on as much stuff as possible so we can keep this series moving. I'll tell you guys what, as we progress and we get higher up into the, closer to the current times, shit will be a lot more detailed. And, these series or these episodes will be mainly focused on like one or two incidents because it's going to take a lot of time to get into it. So you guys will see what I mean. But anyway, so I want to say like 94, around 94, I'm going to just call it the same thing I called it in my book. I started to see an obvious change that started to take place within the movement. And it's known as the red on red conflict. And it's something that was evident something was happening. When 1988, when I first started coming to prison, there was like, as far as PCs, guys that dropped out, there was probably like 3 or 4 in the entire block, in the entire East Block. They were bona fide dropouts, and they were somebody. But when I say bona fide dropouts, I mean these guys were a different type of dropout. They were NF dropouts. They were still soldiers. They still had a level of respect. You still respected these dudes. They still carried themselves with a certain air of respect. Most of them were quiet because, they were excommunicated. They were shut down, but they would still carry themselves well. It's not like this, I don't even know what you call this, Pepsi generation, tight jean generation. These guys are a whole different breed. It's like you got a whole bunch of youngsters and they all act like kids. It's a fucking romper room out there. But back to what I was saying. So 88, that's what it was like. And again, when there was a dropout in the block, we all knew where they were at. When we go out to the yard and, we talk about the household and what was happening in the household, we'd always make we'd always mention or keep everybody updated as far as where the dropouts were, who passed by the cells, because these are dropouts were considered degenerates. They're considered trash. These are the guys that we hate the most. And I'm talking like I was still active because I got to put my mindset. That's how I have to talk in order for you guys to really understand where I'm coming from. So when I say we, you know what I mean? I'm not French, but that's why. So again, these were guys that we looked at as degenerates, trash, pieces of shit. We hated them more than anybody else. We hated them more than Sureños. They were our biggest threat. They were the biggest enemies, our dropouts, our trash. However, make no mistake about it, we never took those individuals lightly. Like they're just a bunch of bitches. They're pieces of shit. They dropped out. They're no good. Fuck them dudes. They're cowards. That doesn't mean that that dude still won't take your win. It doesn't mean that he still won't spear you or he still won't stab you. You can't take that soldier out of an individual just because he made a choice to go take his life in a different direction, or just because, you know, for whatever reason, he's not feeling the politics, or, you know, that fire is no longer burning in his belly as far as, you know, the cause and all that. It does not mean that he's a coward in that respect. Yeah, you know, people are gonna say, yeah, you know, they're cowards because they walked away. I can't respect that. You know, it's for life, you know, till the casket drops. Wah, wah, wah. Yeah, I get it. However, you know, we never took them lightly for the sake, or for the point of explaining this. We never took them lightly. Now, that's just to give you guys an idea. You know, you have a block as big as East Block, it's like 500 inmates in there, and you only had like 3 or 4 dropouts. You know, that goes to show you that it was a different time. The politics were a lot different. People took their commitments a lot more serious, and, you know, everything was being ran different at that time. Now, as the 90s progressed, you had the 1992 indictments. That right there in itself was a political windstorm. It caused a lot of shit. A lot of motherfuckers dropped out as a result of those indictments. There was a lot of politics, a lot of political fallout behind those indictments. And it had a spillover effect on the streets. That happens almost in every indictment, every big NF indictment. It's the same shit that happens every time. Bunch of motherfuckers drop out, bunch of people walk away. There's a bunch of, you know, there's a lot of political fallout that ends up happening. It's like we take 10 steps forward and we take 15 steps backwards whenever we go through one of these types of indictments. Anyway, so 1992, that's when I want to say I started to see a change that was happening within the people, within the movement. The NR started to become, there was a cancer that was permeating within the NR. You know, you had a lot of, at that time, we still had the NR category system. We were still categorizing different NR members for, you know, purposes of putting them in positions, or, you know, for leadership purposes, or just to identify them by grade and experience, similar to what the category system is for the NF. However, you had a lot of individuals that were dishonest about their true status. So it was you had a category 1, a category 2, and a category 3. The same way, category 3 being your highest, category 1 being your lowest level. Now, you had a lot of individuals that were all claiming to be category 3 NR members. When they would drive up to a new household, that would be part of their, you know, whenever they would fill out their NA application or whatever, give up their vitals, their name, their AKA, their hood, their history, their status as an NR member, then they would always include, I'm a Cat 2 or a Cat 3. But everybody was saying it. There was no truth, and there was no way to cross-reference this because we weren't keeping the books updated like that. It wasn't like we could go to a database over there in either San Quentin or Pelican Bay and get it somebody specifically and like, hey, is this individual a Cat 3? It wasn't like that. And one of the reasons was, the reason why it was like that is because this is the reason why that was broken, that system was broken, is because any Cat 3 NR member, had took 2 of them, could bump up another NR member to a Cat 3. So there's no real way to keep track. There's no way to, the checks and balances, they're not there. You can't keep track like that. So the Cat system was scrapped. It was done away with. Said, you know what, fuck it, this is not working. These dudes are misrepresenting their status. So that was one thing that was happening at that time. One of the other things that was happening is a lot of NR members just started pushing on the Norteños. For whatever reason, personal conflicts, they had issues with them in the neighborhood, issues over women, issues over money. A lot of NR members were getting all slung back with ink, and they would look at these Norteños that didn't have no tattoos as, punks. And this dude's a fucking punk. He ain't all slung back. He don't look like me. He don't move like us. So they started to abuse the Norteños. They started to use their status against them. When you become an NR member, as soon as you get recruited, you automatically have status over the non-structured Norteño street gang members. Just the regular ends, regular Norteños. So, even though it's encouraged, not to play homeboy favoritism, no individualism, to respect fellow hermanos, ladies, their families, all these things that we implement, the policies, even though we're pushing them and trying to enforce these rules and these policies, nobody was following them. Nobody was following them. So the NR started to grow. In 1992, 1993, it was off the fucking chains. I'm talking about, there was a booming population, NR members every fucking where. The yards were jam-packed. The rosters were fucking off the hook, man. I used to do them. So I used to see who would come in and who was there, who was housed there. I've told you guys this before, but we go out to the 6-yard and there would be so many homeboys out there. We'd be elbow to elbow and we'd have to run 2 machinas because there was just no room to run, one big machina like that. We used to march, as far as when we would first get out there, we would all line up, we'd get in formation, and then we'd march around the yard once or twice. Loud. I'm talking about that 6-yard behind East Block. As soon as we would start, us and the Africanos all together in formation, and we'd be running that cadence. Through the wall, through the wall, freedom call, freedom call. Who say, we say, who say, we say, mushing, mushing. That's how we used to do it, through the wall. I mean, there was a cadence, and it was crazy, man. You had to be out there it was like a warlike type of fucking march, a warlike dance type of march type of thing. I know that's probably not, hopefully you guys understand what I'm saying, but it was like, as soon as we start, all the death row yards would stop, and you just look over there and you see them all looking like, what the fuck, you know what I mean? Because it was loud, man. It was loud. You got 100 dudes all marching together in sync, It's fucking loud. Anyway, back to what I was saying. So the NR started to grow. It started, the ranks were they were bristling, I mean, there was just a lot of fucking homeboys, man. A lot of NR members in Tracy, in San Quentin, in Solano, in Folsom. Like, there was just a lot of a lot of active homies at that time. But over the next couple years, that's when things just started to deteriorate, man. Things just started happening. And, I seen it. As a young NR member, I seen it. I watched. I kept my mouth shut, but I watched. And I remember thinking, like, damn, what the fuck's going on? Because now you've seen a lot of homies that have started to drop out. And at that time, it was, a major thing. When you seen somebody drop out, it was a major thing. Like, fuck, there goes his career. He's gone. You know what I mean? Now that dude's like, it's like a fucking homeboy dying. That's what it's like when somebody drops out. But at least back then, it's like, you know, he just died. So it was a big thing. As time went on and more homies dropped out, and they just started dropping out in epic numbers. I remember times in Quentin, man, there'd be 3, 4 homies a day that would drop out. I get kites, AP, such and such, just locked it up. AP, such and such sent me all his contraband, said he's done, he's cool, man. Such and such just he laid it down. Such and such is not responding. Hey, they just picked up dude and took him down to the first tier. At one point, it didn't come as a major thing no more. It was like we got used to it. It became, it was customary. It happened every day. It was like, oh, another one bites the dust. It's not me. All I can keep doing is keep pushing, keep going forward with what I'm doing. I can't worry about the next man that decides to give up. But, again, this was a different breed. A lot of these guys were kids. They had new numbers. You look at the BNLs. I remember at one point, I remember looking at the BNL because I'd be in my cell and I'd be sitting back thinking, just like, damn, what's going on within the movement? Why are all these homies dropping out? What the fuck's going on? Is it at the top? Is it something at the NR? There's a lot of things. Like I said, the NR was pushing, a lot of the Norteños out. The NF, we were going after those rogue NR members. So it was just like a big ecosystem that was feeding on each other. And I remember one day sitting there just thinking about all this, just tripping on it, pulling out a BNL, looking at it, and looking at the CDC numbers. And it tripped me out. I was like, damn, look at all these new numbers. It's not like a B number back in the day or a C number. Like when I first started going to prison, E number. I had an E number, an E26 number. When I first started going to prison, you see guys that would drop out, but they would be like C numbers, and some of them would be D numbers. Occasionally, you see a B number. Occasionally, you see an A number. But there were, they didn't have these double numbers. I'm talking about these old numbers, E26, A24, those kind of numbers. But you used to look at the BNL back then, and there were guys that had been around for a while, maybe 10, 15 years, and then something happened. Politics swallowed them up. Somebody, pushed them out, or somebody pushed an agenda. But these youngsters they last a couple months, maybe a year. A lot of them were brand new fucking numbers. So, it registered in my mind. It was like, what, something's happening. It's happening at the top. It has to start at the top. And it's trickling all the way down to the bottom. Homeboys are not inspired no more. We took their voices away. I remember when we used to go out to these yards, we used to tell the youngsters, hey, if you guys, you guys are part of this movement too. This is your movement. This is why we do this. This is why we spill blood. This is why we're sweating and making sacrifices. This is our thing. If you guys see something that could be better, speak on it. Use your voice. Don't just sit back and don't say nothing. Use your voice. They were encouraged to speak up. Hey, you got an idea? Fucking bring it to the table, man. We're all together here. We're all trying to work for the same objective. So, speak on it, homeboy. You know what I'm saying? So we used to encourage them. Most of a lot of times homies would be in these big meetings, and either they'd be gun shy to say anything because maybe they felt like their idea was stupid, or they didn't say nothing because, they felt like they were out of place, or for whatever reason, whatever type of thing that they were hung up on. That's why a lot of them would never say nothing. But, then they started speaking out. They started bringing ideas to the table. But eventually, we killed their voices. Now it was like, I'm not going to say nothing. I'm not going to say nothing because they seen what was going on. All the negativity, homeboys getting blasted, and our members using dope. Using dope on these main lines, sitting back in the cells, barking, calling shots. They sit in their cells while the yard would get off, and then they come out and fraternize with the enemy, and just shit like that. You know, homeboys getting hit over dope. Maybe somebody knew about a dope debt or something. They just get rid of him because he had knowledge of it, and you know, this is the individual, he can hurt me. So that's the type of dirty shit that was going on. Then, you know, the trust was gone. You know, did you hear what that CO said? For those of you that watched that video that I did with the first CO that I did, not the one that I did on my second channel. I did an interview with JT. He worked in Folsom and Mule Creek. Did you hear what he said about the homeboys stripping out other homies? That's fucking crazy. Now, that takes the cake right there. I've heard that the trust was so broken, so depleted that the homies would, whenever mail call would come, they'd all have to send their mail down to their tier security. The tier security had to read it, screen it, and then send it back. That right there, I can't even wrap my mind around it. It's like, you want to read a private letter between me and my wife, or you know, my mom or my kids. That's fucking wild, man. But to go as far as stripping out other homies, like, man, that's how you know that shit's really fucked up. Homeboys stripping out other homies. Security over security issues. They don't trust them, so they're stripping them out. That's just crazy, man. But anyway, so, you know, we started killing their voices. We took their voices away, and you know, a lot of these guys were, you know, they got discouraged. The NR, you know, recruitment slowed down. A lot of those individuals got hit. You know, we identified the catalysts, the ones that were starting to push that movement. You had, and I've said this over and over, and shout out to DK, shout out to Pee Wee from Gilroy, but these were some of the names that I remember at that time that were getting, they were the ones that were getting blamed for starting a lot of the issues that were happening in the NR. We started hitting those individuals, the DKs, the Pee-wees. But as time went on, that right there became, it was aimless, because, you know, the NF, we had tried to bring the NR back, and we tried to do everything possible, everything imaginable to try to bring this movement back and have everybody back up under, you know, the umbrella, up under the leadership of the NF, operating and functioning as one unified collective. But everything failed at every turn. Something didn't work, or something got broke, and it just didn't work. So at some point, you know, going after the rogue NR members, that just became aimless. It's like, man, we're just killing our people. We're getting rid of a lot of good, solid fucking soldiers. These were dudes, these were diehard NR members. Guys that loved the fucking NR. They were completely dedicated to the NR. They didn't want to become NF members. Hell no. They wanted to stay NR members. This is the movement that they fought for. This was the movement that some of them caught life for. This is the movement that they were willing to kill for and die for. So, no, I'm not trying to become a C. I'm good where I'm at. It's all about that Nuestra Raza. And a lot of these NR members, you know, this was their thing. So what ended up happening is, because nothing seemed to work and everything that we were doing was just, it was failing, we just said, you know what, let's pull the plug. Let's disband the whole movement, take the title away. And, you know, there's two reasons. That was twofold. There was two reasons for taking the title. One was, that's what you had to do in order to disband that movement. You got to take the title away so nobody will continue to represent themselves or identify themselves as NR members. It's gone. It doesn't exist no more. The other reason is because you had you basically had a broken validation system that CDC was pushing in those days. They validated you for anything and everything. It was easy to put 3 points on you and to get you off the main line. If these IGIs were dirty motherfuckers, or you had just some dirty cops that wanted to get you off the yard and put in the chute, all they had to do was say, hey, you know, this picture right here is gang related. That tattoo is gang related. And I heard him say something on the, you know, in one of his phone calls that can be interpreted as an admission. So that's it. You're gone. That's all they needed. And now you will be spending the next 20 years in the SHU program, next 30 years, however long. So that was the other reason. Now, once we pulled the plug and we disbanded the NR, and again, this is going to be later when this happened. I'm speaking a little bit ahead right now because remember, we're still in 94, but this happened in 97. Then what happened is now we had a conflict. We had an internal conflict now that almost turned into a civil war. You had, again, dedicated NR members that were like, hold up, man. How you guys gonna fucking do that? How you gonna take this away from us, man? I got Nuestra Raza blasted all over me. I've spent the last 10 years in the SHU program. And you guys just gonna take that, just take it away like that? Take it away, crumple it up, throw it in the garbage can and say it doesn't exist no more? I'm not feeling that. I'm not feeling that. So, you know, Mike Eo, as a matter of fact, MC from Salinas, he was one of the first NF members to go through Corcoran at that point when everything was kind of coming to a head. And Jasper from Chole, Rudy Uribe was running Corcoran at that time. MC actually felt like the NR were going to hit him. That's what he said. He felt a threat. And they made an inference or something to the effect Jasper had made some type of comment where, you know, Mike Eo felt like these guys could turn on him if you know, he didn't make the right moves. I don't remember the exact circumstances of it, the specifics, but I remember him telling me, he was like, yeah, you know, it got kind of funky over there for a minute. There was a lot of animosity, and, you know, I felt like, shit, I didn't know whether or not to bring my Perazo out to the yard or if, you know, everything was going to be cool. But he ended up going through there on a violation, and then he got up out of there. But that's how bad it got. Anyway, that was the red on red. Now, I would end up catching another violation and going back to San Quentin. And again, this is 94. So this is the beginning of 94. Now, I would become a C in 94, but this would be like towards mid 94. So when I hit San Quentin on this parole violation, they shot me to the adjustment center. This was probably like the third time I'd been there, second or third time. At that point, you know, even though I wasn't an NF member, IGI had started to hear my name out there, you know, probably through cats that were debriefing. A lot of the guys that were dropping out, they were probably, you know, just whenever they would sit them down, you know, they'd probably throw my name out there. Whatever the case was, my name was being thrown out there, and they started to recognize me as being an influential member of the NR. With that being said, this is why they started to put me in the adjustment center. Whenever I come back to San Quentin, sometimes they shoot me to East Block. I stay there for like a week, and then next thing you know, I'm packing my bags and I'm going to the adjustment center, which was like slamming the fuck down. But it was cool at that time. I was hoping that they sent me back to the adjustment center. Death row, 90% of it was death row. As soon as I get there, I get radio, get hooked up, thermals, tumbler, fucking all this shit. Folgers, crystals, whatever I wanted. They'd always look out for us. But anyway, so I remember hitting the adjustment center over there in 94. And at that time, Leo Cano was over there. He was a good homie. Solid homeboy. He was. So I'm going to do a profile on this. Any of you other content creators that are watching this, don't do it. Just don't do it, because you didn't think about it. You don't know about it. So don't act like you do. Anyway, Leo Cano was over there in the Santa Clara County Jail in the early 90s. He was fighting another case. There was an individual named Reaper from Fresno that was in the jail. Hey, shout out to my Fresno folks, man. You guys already know what's up. Anyway, they put a green light on Reaper because he was an F-14er. The homies did. Leo Cano was on the 4th floor with them. So Leo Cano, I think that the green light came through a conversation on the phone or something. I don't remember the exact details, but he got a green light on him. So he went to his cell, got an RB or a tomahawk, whatever. Got a razor, came back and gave him a Kool-Aid smile. He cut his throat from ear to ear, walked up behind him, gave him a chin strap, and just pulled that motherfucker from one ear to the other. It was a bad hit. I remember it came out in the San Jose Mercury the next day. Reaper, obviously he talked, and this was one of the first times somebody of that status had cooperated openly like that. It literally took up the whole front page of the local newspaper, of the local part of the San Jose Mercury. But it was about, him getting hit and the NF activity that was going on in the jail at that time. So Leo Cano would end up getting pulled into those indictments because of that hit right there. He hit Reaper that got him pulled into those indictments. So I'm not sure how much time he ended up getting, somewhere in the neighborhood of from 10 to 15 years. I don't remember. But he was there in the Adjustment Center. The first time I remember running into him, he was there. And, we got a chance to kick it for a minute. I remember Crow from Castroville was there. Who else was there? Crow from Castroville was there. Bad Boy from Salinas was there. Troubles from Salinas was there. Those are the only ones I can remember right now. If I remember any more, I'll let you guys know. Anyway, so it's like the first or second yard that I'm out there with Leo Cano, and we're walking laps. There's some good Africanos that were over there too. I'll talk about them in another episode or later on in this one. Anyway, Left Hand and Yero Ascari, both BGF leaders, they were there. So, it was just by chance. I'm walking the yard with Leo Cano, and we're talking about, the state of affairs, things that are going on within the organization, the case, meaning the indictments, a lot of things that were going on in the San Jose County Jail. He's just kind of put me up on shit that was happening. And, we start talking. He starts going over some of the history, some of the NF history, starts, throwing some names out there, some heavyweights at that time. And the name Pablo Pena comes up. And it's like, as soon as he said that, a light bulb went up. Light bulb turned on in my head. Pablo Pena. That's a name that I remember from the time I was a teenager, a kid. From the time when, I was 12 years old. Actually, 12, maybe even 11. I remember that name, Pablo Pena, from the age of 11 on up. And at that time, when I was there with him in 94, I was 24. So, he was talking about Pinky, and he was talking about Pablo Pena and some other cats that were up there in the Bequete and Corny. And when I heard that name, Pablo Pena, I was like, Pablo Pena, they call him Pantera. And sure enough, he was like, yeah, Pantera. And, I didn't have a bad taste in my mouth. I didn't want any run backs. I wasn't looking to get even with the dude, but I would end up finding out that Pantera was the one that killed my biological father. A lot of you already know the story. My biological dad, he skirted out me and my mom when I was probably around barely even 1. And I heard some stories about how he did it, how he dipped out, and it was what it was, man. He was young, my mom was young, they were both caught up in that cycle. They were both young. Both of them were addicts that were heavily in the drugs. And, from there I got put into foster care, but that's how my dad, he ended up dipping out. So he never ever came back. He was never a part of my life again up until I turned 11. And one day, without going into too much of the specifics, I'm at school. My mom calls me home. She sits me down. She's, at that time, I'm being raised by another guy that my mom had hooked up with. He became my father. He was raising me. I never knew my real dad. So, she sits me down, and I'm like, she was tripping on something. Like, what's the matter? And she was like, look, your biological dad reached out to me today, and he wants to meet you. And being young like that, being young, it's a trip. For those of you that might have had blended families, or had a foster, not a foster parent, but a stepdad or a stepmom, you'll understand. But when she told me that, I felt a level of loyalty to my stepfather. So I kind of acted disinterested, even though I really was. I wanted to know my real dad. Damn, I want to know who he is. I want to meet him. I want to go kick it with. But I held back. I acted like I was disinterested because I didn't want to hurt my stepfather's feelings. I felt like if I did that, I'd be being disloyal to him. So, when she told me that, I was like, oh yeah, all right, well, where was he all these other years, man? But later on that night, my stepfather gets, he gets into the conversation, and he starts pushing. He's like, hey man, that's your dad. That's your blood, man. Go meet him. Go kick it with him. I'm still your pops, man. You know what I'm saying? But go get to know your roots, man. Go get to know that side of your family. It's okay. You know what I'm saying? It's not going to interfere with nothing that we got. We're a family, and anyway, I needed to hear him tell me that because again, I felt a sense of loyalty to him. I felt like if I was to act interested in going to see my real dad, that I might somehow be hurting his feelings, or that I might be offending him. So I'm sure a lot of young kids feel like that. That's a tricky thing when you're dealing with stepdads and stepmoms. So if you guys are somebody that has relationships like this, remember that, because that might be something that you might be missing right there. Anyway, so he would end up getting in touch with me around the age of 11, 12. But just as fast as he came into my life, he was just fast he disappeared. I think I went to see him like 4 or 5 times, and after the fifth time, he would end up getting killed out there in San Jose. All I heard was that some female brought a couple cats to his house. My dad was a small time fucking KJ dealer. He was slinging joints, Lanyos. Nothing, man. Just some fucking joints. Wasn't slinging ounces or quarter peas or nothing like that. Just some fucking Lanyos. But she led them to believe that he was a baller, that he had a lot of money in the house. So they went over there with bad intentions. They went over there to rob him. And he wasn't a small dude. And that's where I get a lot of my, a lot of my characteristics. I get them from him. And he had a similar character that I have. So when they pulled the gun out on him, he was like, well, fuck it, let's do this. So they start fighting over the gun. They're physically fighting. Now, his girl that he was with at that time, Kathy, was in bed. She was in bed when somebody knocked on the door. He gets up and goes to the door. So she's laying in bed, and I remember talking to her. She tells me, all I remember is him going to the door. Somebody knocked on the door. He got up out of bed, went to the door. He's out there for about 10 minutes. Then all of a sudden I heard a bunch of commotion, like somebody was fighting. And then she heard a gunshot. Pop! Popped him. Shot him in the head, right in the forehead. She said she ran out to where he was at on the front porch, and my dad was laying on his back with a bullet right in the middle of his forehead, and that he was just laying there gritting his teeth. Now, when I was younger and I was told that story, it used to fuck with me when I was a kid. I used to see that in my dreams. I used to see him gritting his teeth laying there. That's a trip. I never told nobody that. But, you know, as a youngster, that's something I used to think a lot about. And, you know, his death, it did have an impact on me, but I hid it. I pushed it down. You know what I mean? I pushed it down. I didn't want nobody to see me feel that kind of pain. My mom, you know, when she told me I didn't cry, you know, well, I talked about it. My stepfather, I didn't cry. I pushed it down and I did it on my own terms. You know, I grieved later. And it actually took me years later. But anyway, so enough jibber jabbering. So in 94, when I heard that name, Pablo Pena, that's when I put two and two together. And, you know, I told Leo, I was like, bro, that was my dad that he killed, man. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, I had told him at that time too, was like, bro, I'm not on no shit, you know, to try to get some runbacks on Pantera. I got no ill feelings against him. I don't know. You know, it's something that happened. And, you know, that's street shit, man. That type of shit happens. I've done shit. That's street shit. That type of shit happens out there. So, you know, there's nothing that you can do about something like that. And I wasn't about to take it personal. So we talked about it and let it go, you know. But I was like, man, bro, that's a trip. You know, I appreciate you. I stumbled across that information by accident, but in a sense, it gave me some closure. Now at least I knew exactly who the individual was, where he was at, and all that. So anyway, that that's pretty much what happened during that time. Now, the only other incident that took place at that time in the adjustment center while I was there was, so when I was over there, I met a lot of good ass cats, man. I met, like I've told you guys this before, but obviously Tookie was I consider him a good friend. Little Fee was another Crip that I really got to know over there. Evil and Tretch are two other Crips, highly influential amongst their people. Baby Herc is another one from Pasadena. As far as Mexican Mafia members, there's a bunch of them that I got to know on a personal level. Mike Eisen was over there for a minute. He was somebody, rest in peace to that brother. He's somebody that, you know, had a lot of influence within the Mexican Mafia. And he was one of the older guys that was really pushing for the peace treaty. I just did a spill on that. And I mentioned that to you guys. Him and Benjamin Topo Peters were the ones that were pretty much trying to push that. Anyway, you had Hector and Ronnie Ayala, the two brothers that were over there from San Diego. Hector, you had Chato, Chato from Maravilla. Fuck's his name? Sandoval. You had his first name's not coming to me right now. But anyway, so you had Chato, Sandoval, and I met a lot of other cats. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about this. So this is probably going to be a good time where I'm going to end this in a minute. But so there was another Crip over there that I met named Pablo, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about him in a minute. But, you know, every time I would go over there to the adjustment center, these Mexican Mafia members would bless me, man. And even a lot of the Sureños, they were on some different shit over there. They weren't tripping off the prison politics. These dudes are fighting for their lives. They're dealing with a different kind of adversity over there. So they're not on that north-south bullshit. Whenever we would come through, like me or Mikeo or other NF members, Bad Boy Lucky came through there, a bunch of C's went through there, Brown Bob, they would look out. Hey, you know, gonna shoot you something, what size thermals you wear. I'd end up getting a radio, thermals, like I said, tumbler, sweatshirts, the whole fucking hookup, man. The whole hookup. Like I was living over there. I wanted to stay there in the adjustment center. Anyway, so it was almost like these dudes were reaching out to us like we were their people, man. That's how good of a relationship we had over there with them. We were breaking bread with them, drinking. Mike, you as well. So it was a trip. it's unfortunate that it happened, but one of the things it's always been mandatory for us is whenever you can go to a yard with your adversaries, you have to go. Now, you guys have heard me talk extensively about Corcoran and shit that happened up in Susanville and just other shit. I've always, I've always done what I was supposed to do. Now, even though I had this solid relationship with these guys, we had an open line of communication. At that time, Mike Eisen and another Mexican mafia member over there. I'm not gonna throw him out there. You might not want to be identified, but he was pushing for the peace treaty. And at that time, I told him, look, I'm not at liberty to discuss that type of stuff with you guys. I'm a guppy, man. You know what I'm saying? I'm not even gonna act like I have that type of status. At that time, I didn't. So anyway, what I'm trying to tell you guys is, so one day when they used to run their yard on our off days, they'll run them out on like a Monday. We go out on Tuesday. They go out on Wednesday. No, Wednesday's classification. Then they go out on Thursday. We go out on Friday. They go out on Saturday. We go out on Sunday. So I remember one day they were running yard for them. And I'd been there for a few months. And I'm on the tier chopping it up with the homie, bad boy from Salinas. And all of a sudden, the CO pops up at my gate and it's like, yard. And I'm like, oh, hell yeah. Man, check this out. That Mexican mafia yard they were probably about 50 or 60 deep out there. Most of them dudes were all hitters, man. All of them. I mean, they were killing motherfuckers on that yard. It's not a yard that you would want to end up going out to, but it was mandatory. So they came to my gate and they asked me, and I was like, I did what I was supposed to do. Yeah, I started stripping out. Then they went to Bad Boy's cell and asked him if he wanted to go, and he followed suit. So anyway, after I get dressed, I'm thinking, was like, not gonna lie, man, wasn't scared to fight again. Wasn't scared to go out there and fight, but I'm about to go to a yard with some straight hitters, and there's fucking like 50 of them out there, and I know they have weapons. Now, this was the thing that was kind of crazy about it too, is I knew that if I got out there, I honestly don't think it, because at that time, just the way that things were and the way that they were communicating, I don't think that they would have initiated rushing me. I think they would have waited to see how I acted and then just dealt with me accordingly. But I think if I would have slipped out there, they wouldn't have rushed me. I don't believe so. Maybe I'm fucking wrong, and I could be. But anyway, however it's gonna go, I'm on my motherfucking way to their yard. I get cuffed up and I'm on the third deck. And in order to go to yard, when they take you off the tier, they run you down the stairwell all the way down to the first floor. When you get to the first floor, there's a yard door right there. And you have a yard officer that has a list, the yard list right there. So he's got a list, and then he's got a wand where he's gonna metal detector. That's like the last stop before you hit the yard. So I remember coming down to the first floor being escorted, and that guy was a regular. The cop that picked me and the homie up was a rookie. But when he seen us come out, he was like, oh, hell no. This ain't their yard. He's like, man, these motherfuckers were about to go out there and have a straight motherfucking shindig. How it would have went, there's no doubt I'm not gonna sit here and tell you guys that I went out there and I'd have fucking been knocking out 20 or 30 of them, man. They would have probably would have packed my motherfucking ass out. I would have went out there and swung on somebody, and they'd have probably been chunking me around like a rag doll from one corner of that yard to the other. I probably would have hit shit on that yard I didn't even know was there. But it didn't happen, man. And Bad Boy was right behind me. And even if I would have made it, he wasn't going to make it because I would have been the first one to go out, and they only put one in at a time. So his ass would have just been there for the show. Anyway, this is probably a good place to end this. The only thing I'm going to end it on this note. So at that time on the tier over there was a Crip named Paul Watkins. He's still on death row to this day right now. And I forget where he's from, but he's a Crip, cool ass dude. Remember when he first got there, it was around 93 or 94. He's probably like 26 when he pulled up. Young guy, man, but he was cool. You know, he was like two doors down from me, and we chop it up on the days that we were in the building. We work out and then we chop it up. Over time, I seen him deteriorate over the years. Every time I would go back, they'd end up moving me to the adjustment center. I'd see him. But before I left on that time right there in 94, he started turning into a schizophrenic. For whatever reason, one day he just gassed the CO because he felt like they were fucking with his mail and stopping his people from coming to visit him. He was on one of those types of things, man. He started to allow that environment to start to fucking break him down mentally. He and on the yard, being out there on the yard, he was out there with Fee, Little Money, Samoan Crip out of, I forget where he's from right now, but you guys have heard me talk about him before. So he's out there with his people, and for whatever reason, he swings on Little Money. He takes off on him. So they lay the yard down, and he went out there tripping. He thought Little Money was talking about him when he wasn't. Like, he really let the environment fuck him off. So because he did what he did, they obviously stopped fucking with him. And, he couldn't go on the other yard with the other Crips with like Tookie and Tretch and Evil and all those cats because he, aligned himself with Fee and them dudes. But I think the last time I seen him when I went through Quentin, they put me on the tier, on the third tier. And I remember moving in the cell and I heard, somebody next door to me, they didn't greet me. I didn't know who was in there. All the way up until shower time, I did not know who was in the cell. But I heard this individual just hacking all day, coughing. And when they ran showers and they went to his cell first, man, when they pulled him out, this dude weighed about 260 when I first met him. Now, this is like 5 years later, and this is like on another violation that I was on, but he weighed like 100 pounds soaking wet. He was gone. I took one look in his eyes, man, and there was nobody there. He was gone. That place had completely broke him down. He acknowledged me. He looked at me and he was just like, "Sup, boxer?" But it was almost like when he came out and we locked eyes, man, it was almost like I was seeing something that I wasn't supposed to be seeing. That's how I felt. It was like, damn. I mean, when he walked off, when he spun off, man, I was still standing there just like, I was still kind of shocked, man, by just how thin he was and just the way he looked. He looked crazy, man. I've seen Death Row do that to a lot of those guys. It's another place that will break you down. And it's not because of the design of the place like Pelican Bay or Corcoran Shoe. It's got nothing to do with that. It's because of the circumstances. You're sitting up there on death row. You've been cast out of society. Society has written you off. They want to kill you, and they've got a green light to kill you. So you're sitting there waiting for somebody to kill you. Society has thrown you away. This is the shit that they're dealing with. And I would imagine at some point, these dudes allow those circumstances to get to them so much that they probably think that it gets so bad that every time that front gate opens, they wonder, are they coming to get me to kill me right now? Maybe there's something going on that I don't know about. Maybe there's a new law. Maybe there's a new law that they implemented and that they keep it secret so that we don't go off. I mean, that's the type of shit that they probably think about, if you guys understand what I'm saying. Anyway, I don't want to keep going on and on and on and on about this, but you know, those are the main things I wanted to get in on this episode of 41. I'll pick up another one probably tomorrow, and I'll elaborate a little bit more as far as what was happening within the NR and some other things that were happening within the organization at that time. And then obviously in 94, I would make that step and I would become an NF member, an active NF member. So things changed for me, not only in my life, but you know, being out there on the streets, how I move now, how I operated, how I function, all those things would change drastically once I made that step, made that commitment. So we'll get into it in episode 42. We'll get into an episode 42. Anyways, this your boy B. This episode 41 of Inner Demons. You guys have a good one. Hopefully we'll be able to drop that other video tonight. If not, it'll come out tomorrow. With that said, I'm gone.